I'm back, and I'm even also very, very happy to be here again and to deal with something completely different from the lecture of yesterday. And I really would like to thank Professor Bach for inviting me and other times to deal with LGBT issues. You will see that there are several things to be discussed, and I really hope that my provocative lecture, the title is Navigating, Orientating into Gender and Orientation. So it's a kind of new perspective that I would like to share with you, also in order to establish new collaborations into the LGBT medicine. We really need this, and I'm very proud that Professor Bach Institution is pioneering this field into a way which is absolutely unique in Vietnam, but not just in Vietnam. So, I don't know if you know this author, Zygmunt Bauman. He was one of the most famous sociologists in the world. He was from Poland. He died 2 years ago. But he did a very important knowledge about our society and how the society is changing. In particular, he was dealing with the so-called liquid society. Liquid means fluctuating, as we are, and sexually fluctuating also. Have a look on this cartoon that I prepared for you. It is a cartoon showing that at the beginning, the aim of sex was just reproduction, which is the, let's say, natural condition. So this is the aim of sex for the animals. Then, more recently, we have a kind of a revolution, which is called the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution of the 60s and of the 70s of the last century was having another aim. The aim of sex was not just reproduction, but love. So people were making sex for love. Then this, we can call it a kind of a cultural threshold because it is a kind of emancipation of the pleasure from sex. But what about now? In many, many societies, people, young people, are doing sex for pleasure. So the aim of sex is not just love, it could be. It's not just reproduction, it could be, but could be also love. And this is absolutely a novelty. And in particular, this is a kind of emancipation of the pleasure from love. And this situation that I called the liquid threshold, using the same term of Zygmunt Bauman, the liquid threshold is the new evolution of the couple. So, another way to understand what liquid means is to use the term fluid. And in particular, this is very, very important for the aim of this lecture, because we will deal with the fluid gender identities, which is a major part of the LGBT story. To be honest, you can never use the nature to say that the nature is binary. It is not true that in nature exist only male and female. This is absolutely not true. It is a common perception of people, but it is absolutely far from the scientific evidences. So there are situations like in our species where the females, they do have 2 X chromosomes, while male, they have 1 X chromosome and another little, without one leg, which is called Y chromosome. But this is true for several species, like many mammals. Some fishes, not so many. Some insects, not so many. Some snakes, not so many. And some plants, not so many. In many, many other natural conditions, males can be without a Y chromosome. So the nature is really providing a lot of surprises about this. For example, in the birds, as well in the butterflies, there is the ZY female and ZZ male. So there are different chromosomes identify the sex of the population. And there are also many, many others differences, like in frogs, for example, like in other animals where there is the haplodiploidy, like bees, like several insects, and as well also spiders, where there are a lot of different and fluid conditions. And some animals are also able to shift from one sex to the other gender, to the other sex, according, for example, to the temperature. So in the case of many fishes, the temperature may impact very much into decision to be male or female. And if you look at another animal like snails, for example, I like very much to eat snails here in Vietnam, is a wonderful food, but the snakes, they decide who is the male and who is the female, making a kind of battle. The two animals are facing each other, and they do have a kind of sword, and the first who is able to hit the other, he will be the male, while the other one will be the female. So they are called hermaphrodites, because they are fluid and they can change from one sex to another sex. So this is the demonstration that when your patient is coming to your office telling, the nature wants me to be male or female, this is completely wrong. For the nature, there are several possibilities. A lot of possibilities. Hello, Eric. It's nice to see you. Hi, Tam. So nice to see you again. Okay, so those are the snails I was talking about, but there are also fishes having the same ability to fluctuate from one gender to the other gender, from one sex to another sex. So again, never use the term natural when dealing with the sex, because nature is providing a rainbow of possibilities, everything of possibilities, and what you can call differences in sex, but also sometimes you can call it paraphilias. They can be present in nature. They are a representation in animals of this. So the first part of my talk will be on sexual orientation. I will discuss a little bit about this point. Again, sexual orientation is largely present in nature. There are several animals. In some animals, it is a real homosexuality or same-gender interest, same-sex orientation. I know that sometimes the term homosexual is not so nice for some people. Some people dislike to be called homosexual. Some others don't dislike to be called heterosexual, but this is a lot of discussion about the names. But also in some species, there are real individuals who are completely and fully same-sex orientation or homosexual. So we can have some kind of operational definitions about same-sex orientation or homosexuality, which is characterized by the contact, the interest for people of the same sex. It's fun because sometimes people call same gender orientation, which is completely wrong. definition, because it's not the same gender, it's same sex orientation. Anyway, this interest is characterized by the same-sex contact, either as a genital act or long-term romantic or sexual or erotic interest. The same-sex orientation person is able to fall in love with and become the pair-bonded sexual erotic partner of only a person of the same morphological sex. And this definition is coming from one scientist, a psychologist from Australia, I think. He went to United States later, John Money, and he did a lot of work, and he was also influencing a lot research in the field of orientation, the field of gender, making some mistakes that I will show you as some risk. So we can distinguish between the sexual attraction, the sexual behavior, the identity, which sometimes can be also called gender identity, and the orientation itself, like what is derived for any of the previously mentioned things. We have here three psychiatrists sitting in front of me, and we have to admit that the psychiatrists did not the best for defining homosexuality. In fact, at the beginning, into the psychiatric textbook, the Bible of psychiatric, the so-called DSM, homosexuality or same-sex orientation was defined at the beginning as a sociopathic personality. Then later, in the middle of the sexual revolution, they have been able to again to define homosexuality as sexual deviation. So definitely the psychiatrists need a lot of time in order to understand what is sick, what is healthy. And then finally, after many years again, in the middle of the sexual revolution, 74, sexual orientation as a disturbances, and then in the 80s, they said that it is sick only the homosexual who is unhappy to be homosexual, which is called ego-dystonic homosexuality. And finally, in 87, it was not included as a disease into the DSM. And this point is very important. And we will see how important it is also in the perspective of gender issues. Because again, the definition of the genders could make a huge difference about it. So I wrote this article many years ago regarding another very key point. If we believe that heterosexuality is sometimes dominated by nature, dominated by genes, dominated by biology, we should admit that the same could occur into same-sex orientation. And that this is a never-ending debate. What we know is that definitely there is a kind of possible biological template which can be modified by experience, culture, happenings, religions, pressures from parents, and all those things may modify the answer to this question, very odd question, homosexuality, nature, or culture. I wanted to stress the fact that the very large majority of the data have been produced in male. In the reality, nobody is really taking care of female homosexuality. And we can discuss a lot why there is this discrepancy, because it is very, very interesting. This is a very recent paper which has been published in the American Journal of Human Genetics. It is one month ago published. It is a review which was encompassing all the genetic studies related to the homosexuality, to the same-sex orientation. And basically, they found that there are several linkage studies showing that there is some nuance, some possibility to identify something which could be related to genes, but nobody was able to find any gene really related to the homosexuality. So no one can say you are homosexual because of the genes, but definitely science demonstrated that there are some signatures which are more frequently seen in people having same-sex interest with a kind of genetic strength. Another very important point regarding homosexuality is related to the Darwinian perspective, which I like very much. I studied a lot. I tried to study a lot of the Darwinian perspective. I really think that Darwin was the best scientist, the best sexologist ever. Nobody was so great as Charles Darwin defining human and animal sexual behavior. So let's try to understand the evolution of homosexuality. I strongly suggest you to read this book, which has been published last year from Frans de Waal. It is the most important primatologist in the world. It is from Netherlands, and it is very interesting because his previous book was Theology of Bonobos. Theology means the theology of monkeys. Bonobos are monkeys because he demonstrated that they have a kind of metaphysic ability to behave. This book, different, that is the name of the book, is demonstrating how frequently, in this case you can see male-to-male masturbation, how frequently homosexuality, true homosexuality, not that one induced by, for example, the jail. Because it's true that some animals, if they are in a cage, if they are into a jail, they may have a kind of homosexual behavior. But this is not true homosexuality. But those are in freedom, and we can say that there is a real interest for the same sex in this kind of animals. Those are bonobos. I just wanted to remember that we share with this animal 98% of our genes. We are almost identical. The difference is just 2% of our genes. This demonstrated that we are monkeys, and this demonstrated also that the difference between us and the monkeys is just 2%. So this is another very interesting article, which is demonstrating that the same-sex sexual behavior is diffuse in animals. But the problem is why homosexuality remains in nature. Because from a Darwinian perspective, it's a kind of nonsense. Because for the Darwinian law, you will survive if you will reproduce. The reproduction is the aim of the animal, the final aim. You remember what I said about Bauman at the beginning of my talk. But there are several theories showing why it is present homosexuality also in the animals. So this is the tree of the evolution of the same-sex sexual behavior also in non-human mammals, and there is a kind of a phylogenetic distribution of the presence of the homosexuality, both in male and in female. And this is demonstrating that definitely homosexuality, it is natural as heterosexuality is, exactly at the same, in the same way. And these are the presence of homosexuality in many mammals, as you can see, up to the monkeys, up to the apes, as we are, like the presence in male, which is increasing according to the evolution. It seems that more evolved the animal is, more homosexuality could be present. This is also interesting. But a major point when we realized that homosexuality is not a disease, we have to admit that there is a disease, which is a deep disease. And the disease is phobic behaviors against people who have sex with same gender, same sex. This is the real disease. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I know that phobia means disease. And being homophobic means to have fear without any reason to have heavy fear of homosexual people, or of transsexual people, or of bisexual people. So we recently wrote this textbook. I'm very proud of it because it appears a couple of months ago, pardon me, regarding the sexual abuse, physical and emotional sexual abuse, with a huge part of the many chapters dedicated to the phobic behaviors. I'm also very proud because coming from a Catholic country, we did have also some chapters written by priests and monks about the abuse in the monasteries, in the Catholic monasteries. We demonstrated by using studies on the personalities that the homophobic behavior, it is characteristic of personalities characterized by psychoticism, which is not a psychosis, it's just the tendency to have psychiatric problems, and to immature defense mechanism, as well to the so-called fearful attachment style. This article was very, very popular when Trump went to his first attempt to win the election. And in the United States, this article has been used in order to demonstrate that Trump was, as it is actually, immature, because he clearly shown a homophobic behavior. However, this was not enough, as you saw into the recent, in this week, how this was not enough in order to convince how dangerous could be to have an homophobic attitude, which is so much correlated to psychoticism, to the immature defense mechanism, and to the so-called fearful attachment style, as demonstrated by dedicated psychometric tools. This is another article that we produced in order to compare transphobia, the phobic behavior against transsexual people, and homophobia into the general population and the healthcare people. And it is, again, the homophobic behavior, homophobic scale, another psychometric tool, well validated, is correlating with the paranoid ideation as well to the psychoticism. This is also a fun article that we published comparing 3 different countries with 3 different religions. One is the Catholic one, the Italian, then the Muslim country, which is Albania, and finally Ukraine, which is an Orthodox country. And comparing the level of homophobia, we demonstrated that the religion is not doing anything. What is doing a lot of risk to be homophobic is to be strictly religious. So it's not because you are Catholic, but if you are strictly Orthodox, you can be homophobic. This is the same for Muslim countries. This is the same for Orthodox countries. So this is important because it's not just the religion itself, but the way you are living your religion is changing your ability to be or not homophobic or transphobic. Finally, there is another interesting article which is showing the attitudes against bisexual people, people who like to have sex with both male and female. And we demonstrated that, unfortunately, biphobia, which is the attitude against bisexual people, it is present also in the homosexual community, is present also in the transsexual community too. Finally, this is a new article, a new manuscript that we sent just 2 days ago to the Journal of Sexual Medicine. I had the opportunity to collaborate with La Charité Hospital in Berlin and with the Hanoi Medical University here and Professor Bach. And it is a very interesting finding article, manuscript, dealing with the knowledge as well, the attitudes against genderism, about transphobia, into the person, regarding the person of the LGBT community, into the Vietnamese urologist and andrologist. And those are the results that I'm roughly showing you, that there is 12% of people who are phobic against the lesbians. More than twice, are phobic against male homosexual, against gay. There is a lot of people, of urologists, who are against trans, and just 30% who are neutral with respect to gender and orientation issues. It means that the education of the doctors is definitely our scope, our aim, because there is a lot of things to do. Remember that the urologists and andrologists are dealing with reproduction, are dealing with sex, are dealing with sexuality. So if they do have such a phobic behavior, it means that definitely there is a need for education. Let's go to the gender, and we can leave the orientation issue, and then let's go to the gender. So that's another tricky issue, because, in English, the term gender studies means a lot of things. When I was in the United States working at NIH, when I was into the library of NIH, I saw gender studies into the library, which was just feminist books, just feminist. It is just a way to say. While gender medicine is a field of medicine which is trying to demonstrate which are the biological differences in medicine between male and female. For example, you know that the symptom of heart infarction is different from male to female. The ability of the female body to respond to aspirin is completely different to that one of male. So this is gender medicine. But this is making a lot of confusion, actually, because how to call who want to study the LGBT community and the gender issue, the issues related to the gender. Gender medicine is, what I said, is something which is, in English, is something which studies the differences between the two sexes, but gender medicine is not to be considered just female medicine, because that one is gynecology. So we may use the term transgender medicine, which is probably more correct and the right one in order to identify what we want. This cartoon is very clear because it identifies the three major points. One is coming from the biology, from the genital, for example, that we can call biological sex. The other one is regarding who I want to have in my bed tonight, and this one is called orientation. And the third one is gender, which means who I think I am, who I believe to be, who I want to be, male or female, or neither male and neither female. I can also have this possibility. So how we perceive ourselves, this is the gender. Let me show you some terms which are basically coming from Money that I mentioned before. So gender is referred to the social aspect, psychological characteristics associated to being male or female. I remember that he wrote this one in the 60s, more or less when I'm born, so 60 years ago. Now we can have a better definition about this because it's not considering the fluctuation. The gender identity is something which is kind of view of being a girl, of being a boy, and then later to being a woman or male. The sexual identity is referred to a number of factors, which is including the biological aspect of the gender identity, the role, as well as the sexual orientation. So several terms. The gender role is related to how we call it, the behaviors, for example, the use of pink dress for girls, and the azure one for boys. So this is the so-called gender role. And finally, there is the gender ideology, which is the political, let's say, way to understand how the people think to be. So basically, gender is a biological or a cultural feature. This cartoon is very nice because it's showing what is currently happening in young people. Shall we really decide in which gender I have to stay? And many young people, they said, well, I don't need to do it. Maybe you need to define my gender, but I don't. And if you really need, it's because you have some problems. This guy is Money, that I presented you before. And he was very, very important for the field of gender, for the field of orientation, but he did a lot of mistakes. He was very important because he introduced for the first time the term gender role, the term gender orientation, sexual orientation, and gender identity. He was working with an endocrinologist, doing a lot of research in this field, and this was very important. The idea of John Money was that from the chromosomes you can have the gonads, from the gonads you can have the hormones, from the hormones you can have the body, and finally it will be assigned, the gender will be assigned. Eric, could you help me in reading in the right way the German term heterogeny der Zweck? Zwecke, okay. I don't know if you can understand what does it mean. It means the heterogeneity of the aims. It means that if I wanted to do something, for example, if I wanted to make a war against Ukrainian, and the Ukrainians are going to the other side, this is a typical heterogenesis of the aims. So I'm trying to do something, but at the end of the story, I'm doing exactly, the results will be exactly the vice versa of what I try to do. So this was the same for John Money, because John Money wrote that we are neutral at birth. At birth, we are neutral. There is not, the culture is pushing us into a female or male section, let's say, part of the story. And this idea was very, very smart, but it has been a clear heterogenesis of the aims because this was the opening the door, unfortunately, to this criminal idea of some psychologists to modify gender and orientation in the so-called reparative theory. Because that reparative theory, which means I can cure homosexuality, I can cure with a psychotherapy, with electricity, with hormones, with a torture, any kind of so-called therapy, it is coming because of the idea of John Money that we are neutral. Otherwise, if I can say, I am homosexual, I am heterosexual, I am bisexual, and I'm not becoming that one, this is closing the possibility to use such a kind of reparative theory. I just want to mention that in the very large majority of the psychological and psychiatric societies in the world, this therapy is forbidden, is considered illegal, is considered also criminal, but unfortunately, it is still largely present. It is still largely used in several settings. And the name of Nicolosi and Nicolosi is famous for this criminal attempt to cure homosexuality and transsexuality. But I wanted to convince you about the heterogeneity of the aims of Monet, telling you about this story. I don't know if you remember this story, which was very famous. This is the story of an American boy, who was a twin of another one, two males, and he was circumcised at the birth, but his penis was cut by mistake by the surgeon at the birth. So John Money arrived and said, don't worry, he will be a female without any problem. We will give him hormones. We will call her as a female. We will dress her as a female. And she will grow happy without the penis. With hormones, she will develop as a female. So she will be very happy. This was not the case. Actually, the story of David Reimer was tragical because this guy realized at the puberty to be a male. He tried to become back to be male, to have a new penis, because the penis was cut. And then he made suicide because nobody was really able to help him. So this is the demonstration that we must be very careful, and possibly without any ideological perspective. The ideology is the real risk when we are dealing with LGBT community. And my suggestion is never, never, never use ideology. Just listen to the patient, just be patient-friendly, just try to understand what the patient wants, but never use any kind of ideology, otherwise you will make such a tragedy like that one. And this is the end of the story of the poor David Reimer who made suicide. Those are studies showing the hormonal and other aspects, but those studies are helping me in order to show another story, which is the story of Kelly. In this case, there is this book that, again, I strongly suggest you to read. The name is Middlesex. This guy won a Pulitzer Prize, so it was great. It is a great writer, and it is very interesting, the beginning of the book, because it's written, I'm born twice, first as a girl, and then in Detroit in the 60s as a teenager boy, when the penis appeared from the female body, because the kind of disease they do have is an intersex condition, which is showing the appearance of the male genitalia only at the puberty. This is the demonstration how fluctuating nature is. Also in the nature we have such, in the human nature, we have such intersex situation like that one described in this wonderful book, which is Middlesex. So we can say that the perspective that I'm following as more as I can, which is an evolution of the biopsychocultural model, which I call the system sexology, which means to understand the various systems, the systems of culture, the system of education, the system of religion, the system of policy, the system of biology, of course, and intrapsychic and relational aspect too. This system sexology is helping us to understand what the genes and hormones are doing in orientation and the gender. That we can say that they are the hardware, while education is the software that we are using in order to be more or less or in between male, female, or fluid. And then there are reinforcements or limits of our orientation, of our identity, like the society, like the stereotypes, like the political issues, like the presence of the peers, which are also very important in several cultures, in modifying, in reinforcing, or in limiting our freedom to identify ourselves for our gender, for our orientation. And it is fun, if you look at the literature, scientific literature, that we spent a lot of efforts in order to understand the biology of homosexuality and not so much regarding the biology of the gender orientation. There is another point that is really typical of our time, actually. In some culture is not so well known, it's still an hidden issue, but there are a lot of young people who refuse to identify themselves according to the stereotype of A and B, plus and minus, male and female. They realize that they don't want to be identified in this way. And we call them a non-binary solution, non-binary choice. And there are several manifestos showing how important it is to make free these young people to not identify themselves according to this. The non-binarism is a kind of umbrella term. In fact, is encompassing a lot of what we call LGBT, LGBT plus, many terms can be added, where basically there are so many definitions that is also useless to try to make a complete vocabulary. Okay, you understood. Because many people can say, okay, I am a gender flux, but I am gender flux just some days of the week. So I am a weekly gender flux. So this is another interesting point that it is almost useless to try to make such a definition. So non-binarism is the experience of gender as outside the gender binarism. And this is very important, the fact that we have this possibility. The term therapy is probably non-correct, but maybe better intervention or help for non-binary people. Basically, what we have to do is provide, consider, and provide, providing that non-binary people with individualized assessment, and when they do need affirmation of their experience, provide it. Consider the gender-affirming medical intervention like hormonal treatment and surgery where there is a need for it. Consider the gender-affirming surgery that Professor Bach is going to develop here in Hanoi, in the Hanoi Medical University. This will be it is a wonderful task, definitely, and a pioneer in Asia too, providing information to non-binary people about the effect of the treatments, both hormonal and surgical. It is also to be noted, according to this very interesting article wrote in Florence, in Italy, that the very large majority of non-binary people, not transsexual, but non-binary people, they are not really interested nor in changing the name, nor in the hormonal therapies, nor in the surgery. So many of them, they just want to not to be identified into a binary way. This is the unique aim they want. Some of them are transsexual, they want the other things. Now, I need your help. I need your help because I do not have a solution about this conundrum. I do not have a solution about this question. Shall we call gender dysphoria or transsexualism a disease or shall not do it? And this is a big question, because one possibility, this is the Italian solution, which is a little bit hypocrite, because it is a non-pathological condition, which is deserving medical attention and sometimes treatment. Okay, we can discuss a lot, and I really do not have any real solution, because if I'm, as endocrinologist, if I'm giving hormones, I must make a diagnosis. If Professor Bach is doing surgery, should be a kind of disease. Otherwise, you are not allowed to make any kind of surgery, such a risky and problematic surgery. So really, I do not have any answer about it, and I really would like to understand which is your position about to define or not this condition as a disease. For sure, no stigma. For sure, not any kind of judgment about it. But recognizing as a need, a medical need, recognizing transsexualism as something which must be cured. We are doctors. We are into the medical faculty. And we are dealing with sick people, actually, not with healthy people. And if we are doing this, it means that there is a kind of disease. But which kind of disease? This is the problem. This is the major problem. And again, I want to highlight the difference between the psychiatric perspective and the other perspective. Because in the most recent DSM-5 version of the manual, reference manual, diagnostic reference manual of the psychiatrist, transsexualism is defined gender dysphoria. Dysphoria means psychiatric disease. Okay? So it is a kind of psychiatric disease. This is the definition of the DSM. Then we have another definition which is coming from the World Organization of Health, the WHO, which is defining transsexualism into a completely different way. It is defined within the sexual dysfunctions, as a sexual dysfunction, as not a psychiatric dysfunction, but as a sexual dysfunction. And I think that this is definitely, because it is classified within the chapter of conditions related to the sexual health, and I think that this is the right way to deal with the transsexual people. And I have a demonstration of it despite this document, which is the so-called VUPAT standard of care, which is a quite strange document, because there are a lot of good scientists dealing with transgender and gender diverse care, but there are also patients. And it is the unique field in medicine where the patients are inside, because I never seen one document coming about pneumonia where the association of people with pneumonia are making some voice about it. And I think that this is also a matter of discussion, the fact that in the field of gender, in the field of homosexuality, many scientists believe that they do have the need to have also the stakeholder, to have also the patients inside the discussion. And I think that this is very risky. And so we have to be very simple, an evolution of the definition, very recent, actually, few years, psychiatric disease for the DSM-5, sexual condition for ECD-11, as I called the gender incongruence, here is called gender dysphoria, and in the VUPAT new definition that is called transgender and gender diverse people. So no disease, nothing about it. However, I strongly suggest you to read this Lancet Psychiatric article, which is simply wonderful. It is very elegant. It is comparing two different sets of identical transsexual in Mexico. One group has been studied using the definition of a DSM-5. as gender dysphoria. The other group has been studied and cured considering transsexualism as a sexual disease, a sexual condition, a sexual problem. The difference was tremendously impressive. Because in the first one, in the group treated as a psychiatric condition, much more HIV, loss of job, loss of parental care, prostitution, everything was much worse with respect to the other group which has been treated as a sexual dysfunction, like erectile dysfunction, like premature ejaculation, anorgasmia, vaginismus, and so on. And this is very, very clear, demonstrating how the definition and the setting is tremendously important. Be careful, because I do think that the psychiatric are not essential. More than essential, no one group dealing with transgenderism can not have the psychiatrist as well as the psychologist. They are definitely needed because, unfortunately, because of the transphobia, this group of people is much more prone to psychiatric diseases. And so they need the support of the psychiatrists is tremendously important. But they should not be defined as crazy, let's say, as the psychiatric patients. So let me go to the end of my talk with a scientific proposal for you. And that one is the attempt to connect together what is related to the orientation, what is related to the gender, what we called identity orientation, identity together with orientation. So we prepared this new psychometric tool that I really would like to be developed in Vietnamese, in German, in English, and as well in Italian. This is, at the moment, just a proposal. Maybe you remember this scale, which is called the Kinsey scale. The Kinsey scale is a famous scale produced by Alfred Kinsey into the 40s of the past century, where there are in one part heterosexuality, in the other part homosexuality, and the patient, the subjects, may classify themselves according to a continuum. So I tried by myself to produce, let's say, a scale for the identity, producing again a kind of continuum where there is a full transsexuality and full non-transsexuality, but that was not so much working, so I tried to use it with the patients, was not so much working. So this is the novelty. This is what we call the SIGO, and SIGO means X for female, Y for male, G for gender, O for orientation. And in this scale, each subject, not patient, each subject can identify herself, himself, according to this scale. Having these 3 points, this is a 0. 0 means I don't want to say. 0 means I am in between. 0 means I am fluid. So 0 is also a result, where there are possibility to select from 1 to 3 about the female identity, then from -1 to -3 about the male identity. At the same time, the patient can identify himself about the orientation, like -3, full heterosexual orientation, and here +3, full homosexual or same-sex orientation. So this is a representation of it. This, for example, is a male, genetically male, actually, and he may identify himself according to these various possibilities, but the same could happen for the female one, female scale, and also the patient can identify, as I said, as a non-binary, writing 0 or writing +2, -2, in order to identify himself in this scale. And the fluctuation, which is also identified as gender fluidity. You can also find patients who may define themselves according to the bisexuality. They can shift from one part of the scale to the other and into a different part of the gender scale at the same time. What is very interesting is that you can have also asexual people without any number, actually. And what is, in my way, particularly interesting is the fact that each subject, patient under treatment, patient, young boy, young girls who want to change sex or not, to change gender or not, can be identified with a very, very simple formula. The very simple formula is that one. For example, look at this. X, which means that she is genetically female, but the gender is -3. It means that she is non-transsexual, absolutely non-transsexual, but is 0 plus -3. So at the end of the story, it is a transsexual, bisexual, and pansexual. So in the same formula, you can identify clearly both gender and orientation into a very, very simple way. And also this will be very helpful for what? For the follow-up. Because people can change their mind, people can change the orientation, people can change the gender. And so you can, if you have this record in your clinical log, you can also follow the possible changes. So I think that this one could be very interesting if used in clinics like that one, because I'm pretty sure that it will help very much. As you can see, there are all the possible definitions about the gender, about orientation, about anything. All can be transformed into a formula. And also respecting the possibility not to select, because the 0 is the way to say that I don't want to be identified in one way or in another way. So what we submitted, we received 1 week ago, the first trial was the first response from the journal. Seems quite interested, definitely very interested in this. We consider XIGO as a unique and new holistic perspective aiming to integrate both the components of the sexual identity, which is the gender identity as well, the sexual orientation together, having a unique psychometric tool able to provide more clear interpretation to facilitate the daily clinical workup, the follow-up, as well to improve the biomedical and psychosexological research. One of the reasons I'm here, not just for the great pleasure to meet my friends here in Vietnam and from Germany, is also to highlight the need for me to help us in validating in different languages this tool, because I think that it will be very, very important. We have a Latin sentence that it is the end of my talk, which is longa via est propera, which means the road is long, so hurry up. Thank you for your attention. Come on.